I used to believe that doing good work was enough to be recognized, that if I worked hard, if I stayed honest, if I was willing to remain behind the scenes, people would remember me when success arrived. But no one ever mentions the person backstage during the celebration, and it only takes one short email to erase your name from a project you helped build. My name is Cindy Crawford. I was 32 at the time. I had just left the company where I once co-founded a media initiative with a small team. We called it True Emotion. It was a series of short videos rooted in real life, giving young people a space to voice the pain they often kept hidden. The project spread so quickly that I once thought, we're going to change how marketing works in this country. But just a few months later, the very team I once considered family decided to push me out. I remember that day clearly. It was a Tuesday morning. Rain tapped lightly against the window. My coffee had gone cold on the desk, and I just sat there, staring at the screen. A message arrived from Harper, the team lead, the person I had trusted the most. It contained only one sentence. We've decided to rename the project, and the team is moving in a new direction. Thank you, Cindy, for your early contributions. There was no meeting, no explanation. No one asked if I was okay. I checked our internal group. My name had been removed from the project description. My work account had been deactivated. All I had left was my personal email and a hard drive containing the original drafts of those early videos, built from sleepless nights. I don't know how long I sat in that room. I only remember that when I finally stood up. My legs were numb in the mirror. My eyes were dark and heavy. I no longer looked like the passionate creator I thought I was. I looked like someone who had been betrayed, someone left behind without warning. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't lash out publicly. I just disappeared from social media, turned off my phone for 3 days, and quietly unfollowed everyone I had once worked with. A few people messaged me. One asked, "Cindy, why don't I see you on the page anymore?" I replied, "I'm no longer part of that project." No one followed up. I resigned completely from my job at the parent company, a multi-platform content studio. At that point, I didn't want to step inside another office ever again. The meetings filled with flattering words, the strategy sessions masked with hidden intentions, the constant maneuvering to push others out of the spotlight. It made me feel cold. I used to believe in lasting relationships at work, that if you built something together, it meant something. But after that experience, I wasn't so sure anymore. The first morning of unemployment, I woke up at 10. No alarm, no emails waiting for a response. I made myself a fresh cup of coffee and sat in silence on the balcony, watching the street below. Everyone else was still going to work, still rushing, still trying to meet deadlines. And I felt like life had placed me outside of the current I once helped shape. I kept asking myself, what did I do wrong? Was it because I was quiet? Was it because I trusted too easily? Or was I simply not loud enough to hold my place in a game of power? There was a moment when I seriously considered leaving the industry for good, deleting every personal channel, wiping every portfolio, and starting over in a place where no one knew who I had once been. But then, one afternoon, while cleaning out an old hard drive, I opened the very first video of True Emotion. The voice of the speaker came on. A young woman, once mocked for her appearance, began crying as she recalled the first time someone had called her beautiful. I remember that day vividly. I was there in the studio. I was the one who asked her, "How does it feel to be seen?" And she answered, "It feels like I'm no longer invisible." I closed the video, sat there for a long time. That night, I didn't sleep. I began drafting a new plan. I didn't share it. I didn't post it. No one else knew, just me. I called it the Nameless Project. That was the moment I realized I never wanted the spotlight. What I truly wanted was meaning, to prove to the people who erased me from the room that I never needed them to create something that matters. I had no intention of fighting back with insults or exposure. I chose to respond with success, but this time, No one would be able to take the credit away from me again. There is no applause for the person who just got removed from a game they helped initiate. And of course, no one asks what you need after losing everything. That was something I came to understand during my first month after leaving the old company. Everything fell silent. The scariest part was not the public criticism. It was the complete absence of noise, a kind of abandonment that worked in subtle but deeply effective ways. I spent those first days in the mindset of someone who had just been rejected. Every time I opened my phone, I saw that I no longer belonged to any groups. All the work messages were gone. Old social media posts now appeared like remnants of a world I no longer had access to. Everything seemed to be telling me one thing: you are no longer here. But in that space of silence, I began to sit with myself. No teams, no mentors, no support systems. Just one question left to answer. If I had once created something people remembered, then why couldn't I do it again? I opened the original notes I had written when we first came up with the idea for True Emotion. I wasn't doing it to feel nostalgic. I needed to understand what had once made me believe so deeply in it. The answer was scribbled in a blue ink sentence I had once written by hand. People don't need to know who you are, as long as what you create touches something real inside them. So I made the decision to start again from zero. I didn't ask anyone for help. I didn't pitch the idea to anyone. I simply tried to film one short clip. I reached out to Jules, a psychology collaborator from an old project. She agreed to meet without asking who I was working with. We shot a short conversation inside her apartment. The camera was a phone. The audio was raw, without filters or microphones. I didn't want it perfect. I just wanted it to be real. I uploaded the first clip without any promotion. I used my old account, the one named Cindy Afterlight that I had once considered deleting. I wrote the caption in the voice I still believed in. Sometimes what you need is not advice, but someone who will stay and let you finish telling your story. 24 hours later, the clip had over 10,000 views. It wasn't a big number by industry standards, but for me at that moment, it was proof that I had not disappeared. I began to find rhythm again, waking up before 8, making coffee, turning on my laptop, mapping out the content timeline. No one assigned me deadlines, no KPIs, but I created a schedule anyway, as if I were still going to work. I understood that if I wanted to stand strong again in this field, I could not rely on bursts of inspiration. I needed discipline. I named the new series Afterlight, not to flaunt the fact that I had been betrayed, but to prove one thing. That light can still return, even after everyone believes it has faded. Every 2 days, I posted a clip. Each one featured stories from people who had once been overlooked. A single mother who was disowned by her family, a student who fell into depression after being humiliated by a teacher. None of them were famous, none were trained to face the camera, but they told their stories with eyes that carried no bitterness, only lived experience. The comment sections began to grow, not with meaningless emojis, but with long, heartfelt messages. People shared that they had gone through similar pain. I read every line. I replied to each person, slowly, genuinely, not with rehearsed sympathy, but with real gratitude for their willingness to open up. By the 3rd week, a difficult situation arose. One of the participants in the video series was recognized by someone she knew. The clip spread faster than I expected, and soon she became the target of online attacks. Some said she was acting. One person even called her a professional victim. She messaged me close to midnight. Cindy, should I delete the video? I didn't think it would go this far. I sat in silence, looking at the screen. It was the first time I understood so clearly how fragile truth becomes in the digital world. But I also knew this was a test, not for her, for me. I called her immediately. I told her that I was ready to remove the video at any moment if she felt hurt. But I also told her that the clip had received nearly 200 comments from people who said it helped them feel less alone. She stayed quiet for a while, then said, "Keep it. If I was brave enough to speak, I should not let a few cruel voices silence me." That was the moment I realized what I needed to do. I needed to protect the people who were willing to speak up. If I couldn't do that, then I was no different from those who once removed me from the table just to avoid responsibility. In the 4th week, an unexpected invitation came. It was from a boarding school. A 12th grade homeroom teacher sent me an email. She said her students had been watching the videos on Afterlight and asked if I could visit to talk about the power of honest storytelling. I didn't think too long about it. I said yes. There was no payment, no spotlight, just one quiet Friday afternoon in a classroom, where I sat in front of more than 30 students looking at me with curiosity. I shared my story openly about how I had my work taken from me, about how I had been excluded from my former creative team, about how I once thought of disappearing from the industry for good. I don't know how many hearts I reached that day, but after the talk, one boy stood up. He bowed slightly and said, "I was once kicked out of a group project by my classmates. I thought I was the only one who felt that kind of hurt. Now I know it can happen to anyone, but there are also ways to get through it." That one sentence made everything I had silently rebuilt feel worth it. I cannot pinpoint the exact moment they realized I was making a comeback. Perhaps it was when a well-respected media expert reshared one of the Afterlight clips. Or maybe it was when a few of their former partners quietly pulled out of collaborations without offering a reason. But one thing was clear to me. My silence was no longer a wound. It had become an undercurrent. Returning to those who once pushed me aside, I did not need to hear it from them directly, but a few acquaintances, whether by accident or intent, started sending me links. A post from the old company stated they were hiring new media staff because the recent project lacked emotional connection with the audience. A customer review noted that while the new videos were technically polished, they lacked authenticity. Someone left a comment below. "This series used to make me cry. I read everything, but I did not respond, because I knew what unsettles people the most is not a reaction from their rival, but the calm persistence of someone who just keeps going. Composure, not noise, is the heaviest blow." 1 week later, I got a message from Jules. She said, "Harper just emailed me, asking if I'm available for a project." Strange. Since we've never worked directly before, I wasn't surprised. They were trying to bring back familiar faces, hoping to revive something that had already broken. But the truth was clear. People could now see who stood behind the stories that truly resonated, and more importantly, they knew I no longer needed a seat at their table to create value. Jules asked if I wanted her to decline the offer publicly. I told her there was no need. "Just do what you feel is right." She replied to them with one short sentence. "I'm currently working exclusively with the Afterlight project." That was all, but I understood. A chain of events was beginning. That afternoon, I sat at the same cafe where I had once drafted my recovery plan. The rain had just passed. Light spilled softly through the glass onto my steaming cup of coffee. I was adjusting the storyboard for a new video when my phone lit up. It was Katie. She rarely called unless it was something important. "They're holding an emergency online meeting tonight to save true emotion. Apparently, some sponsors are demanding a restructuring of the content, or they'll pull funding." Her voice was quiet, like she was speaking from a conference room. I didn't ask how she knew. With Katie, there were things that needed no explanation. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel vindicated. Just a quiet certainty that truth was doing its work. 3 days later, an unexpected email arrived in the Afterlight inbox. The sender was Marissa Collins, founder of a workshop series for women entrepreneurs. She wrote that she had been watching the videos on the channel and felt something she described as emotional clarity that reaches the mind. Marissa invited me to be the keynote speaker for her fall event, which would gather more than 1,000 people from the creative industry. I read every word carefully. This was the same event the old company had managed the previous year. Now, they had been replaced by a new team, and I, the person once deemed not strong enough to lead, had been chosen to open the event. I called back after sleeping on it, not because I was unsure, but to be certain I wasn't saying yes just to prove something to anyone. I had once been betrayed, but my goal had never been to retaliate with bitterness. I wanted to answer with success. And this time, I was doing it for myself, not for validation from others, but so I could stop doubting my own worth. That night, during the live stream talk, I spoke about the shaky periods when I had lost faith in my work. Below the screen, the comment section filled quickly. Messages like, "This is exactly how I felt. Thank you for saying this." And "This story is so close to mine, it gave me chills," appeared one after another. Amid hundreds of messages, I recognized a familiar name, Harper. She didn't comment, just followed the account. I clicked in. It was her, the same woman who once removed me from the project without a single conversation. And now, she was quietly watching a public talk I was leading. I didn't block her. I didn't delete the follow. I didn't message her either. I left it as it was, a silent reminder that relationships, if not valued at the right time, may one day find themselves on the outside looking in. The next morning, I received a message from one of the original True Emotion members, someone who had worked on post-production, Cindy. "I know you probably don't need to hear this anymore, but I still want to say it. We were wrong. When you were removed from the team, I didn't speak up. Now, looking back, I realized that losing you meant losing the heart of the project. I sat still for a long while after reading that, not because I was emotional, but because I realized something. Apologies, when given at the right time, can be redemptive. But when they arrive too late, they are simply consequences. By now, Afterlight had gathered more than 300,000 followers on its main platform. Media partners began reaching out to inquire about workshops, content contracts, and consulting opportunities. What gave me the most peace was not the number of views, but the fact that I could now make every decision on my own. No need to ask the team. No approval process for captions. I could follow the instincts that had once been dismissed as not marketable enough. I never publicly criticized anyone. But in this industry, shifts are easy to notice. Former sponsors of True Emotion had now moved on to support Afterlight. A few people from the old company began sending indirect messages, proposing a meeting to collaborate like in the early days. I did not reply. I did not come back to reclaim an old position. I came to show them exactly what they had chosen to overlook. Some decisions do not arrive with announcements. They come as a quiet knock inside your mind, once all the data has aligned. That morning, with sunlight coming through the kitchen window, I knew I was ready, not to argue, not to confront, but to step fully into the light, carrying everything I had built in the dark. Afterlight could no longer remain a side project. It needed a name, a form. I submitted papers to register it as an official company, naming it Afterlight Collective. I hired a legal advisor to review every copyright. At the same time, I began reaching out to 3 major content platforms, proposing strategic partnerships, not because I needed them to prove my worth, but because I wanted to pave the way for other young creators who believed in the same thing I did, creating content from honest emotions, untouched by trends or gimmicks. I also rewrote my personal profile from scratch, no longer hiding behind a modest bio. Instead, I typed one single line, founder of Afterlight, former co-founder of True Emotion, the one who gives voice to what no one dares to say. I knew that sentence would make some people uncomfortable, but in the end, it was the truth, and I was done avoiding what everyone already knew. One afternoon in mid-month, Marissa called. Her voice was firm but slightly rushed. "Cindy, there's something I'd like to discuss privately, about the upcoming conference." I paused everything to listen. She explained that my former company had just submitted a proposal to join the event as a media partner. They did not know I was the keynote speaker, and they certainly did not know that I had been given the first right to select the post-production team for the entire video series. Marissa asked plainly, "Do you want me to reject them now?" I stayed quiet for a few seconds. In my mind, fragments of old messages resurfaced, silent meetings, emails framed in polite language but laced with exclusion. I had once lost everything to them, but I did not want that loss to become the driving force behind every future decision. No need to reject them yet, I replied slowly, but let them know who is overseeing content this time, and if they choose to proceed, I'll be the one reviewing the final cut. I heard Marissa chuckle softly on the line. Got it. A chance for them to relearn respect. A week later, the official announcement went out. My name appeared under the project description as creative director for the event's media campaign. Almost immediately, I received a message from Harper. Her words were brief, but the hesitation was hard to miss. Cindy, didn't expect to see you in this role. Hoping we can work well together if needed. I did not respond right away. I left the message unread for 2 days before typing one line. I'll be sending the task checklist on Monday. Please ensure your team meets the deadlines. No greetings, no small talk, no room for personal sentiment. This was no reunion. This was a professional process where I now held the authority. At our first in-person technical meeting, I entered the room in simple clothes, my hair tied back, carrying the same worn laptop I had used back when I was part of the old team. Harper sat across the table, along with a few others who had once removed me from the decision circle. Her eyes hesitated for a second when she saw me walk in, but she quickly returned to a professional expression. I did not sit near them. I chose the seat closest to the presentation screen. As the meeting began, I spoke clearly. This is the content direction for the post-event campaign. All videos must follow 3 principles. Be truthful, no fabricated emotion, and ensure that every participant is protected once their story goes live. No one said a word. I knew they understood. This was no longer their project, where they could shape everything to their liking. This was a space governed by the standards I had set, the same standards they once dismissed as unrealistic. That night, I sat alone in my workspace. The plan was finalized. My inbox was full of confirmations from partners, academics, and guest speakers. On the table was a list of over 100 questions from media outlets. 5 of them had requested exclusive interviews about my journey from rejection to rebuilding. I did not read through them all. I stopped at one line, written by a young editor. Cindy, would you say you took revenge through success? I wasn't sure if I should answer that question, but if someone ever asked me directly, I think I would say this. No, I simply kept living with what they left behind. The end is not revenge. It is the moment you no longer need to prove anything. I did not sleep much the night before the conference, not because I was anxious, but because my mind kept replaying every chapter I had gone through, from the windowless room where I sat after being dismissed, to the email where my name vanished from the list of co-founders, and the soft notification chime when an Afterlight video was reshared by someone who once worked alongside the old team. I used to think the day I returned would feel like a confrontation, but when I slipped on my light black coat and adjusted my hair in front of the mirror, I saw no anger in my eyes, only a woman who was moving forward, no longer looking back. The conference began at 8 in the morning. The hall was full. 150 people sat below, on stage. My name appeared clearly on the LED screen behind me. Cindy Crawford, founder of Afterlight Collective. Next to it was the new logo of the project, simple and soft, exactly how I wanted people to feel about the stories we created. I did not use flashy slides. I opened with one sentence. I did not come here to tell a success story. I came to tell the story of standing up again. The room fell silent. I spoke about the time I was removed from the very project I had created, about the disorientation of having no title left to define myself, about the fear I felt when uploading the first new video under a name I once wanted to erase from memory. Not a single word was chosen to hurt anyone. I spoke in an even tone, with no bitterness. Every detail was true, but none demanded apology or admission. I had long since stopped needing that. After the talk, a middle-aged man came forward to shake my hand. He was the head of content for a major media company in the region. We are looking to invest in long-term emotional storytelling, he said. An Afterlight, with the way you lead it, is exactly what we've been searching for. I nodded in thanks. I did not reply right away, because I knew offers like this no longer came from luck. They were the result of everything that had come before. At the same moment, I noticed Harper standing at the far corner of the hall. She did not come closer. She did not avoid eye contact either. Her gaze met mine for a few seconds. I felt there was nothing left to say. That silence was enough for us to understand. Everything I needed to do had already been done. There was no need for a conversation. I left the hall with the sun now fully up. In my hand was a printed contract for a new collaboration, and a small notebook where I had just written down a fresh idea while waiting backstage. The air outside smelled like early autumn. In that moment, I remembered the day I sat alone in a quiet cafe, sketching out the very first plan for Afterlight. Today felt completely different, yet somehow, the gratitude inside me was exactly the same. I stayed off social media for 2 days after the event. I did not need to see what people were saying. I did not need to count shares or clicks. Instead, I went home, back to the house where I once borrowed my younger brother's desk to edit the very first video. My mother did not ask much. She simply made tea and said, "I knew you were hurting back then, but I can see you're smiling again now." I didn't answer, just nodded. My heart no longer felt heavy like it used to. 2 weeks later, an article appeared in the spotlight section of a major media journal. The headline read, "Afterlight, the emotional storytelling project that is reshaping how young people confront pain." The piece never mentioned my old company. It did not name Harper. It made no reference to the past dismissal, but anyone who knew the story could understand everything between the lines. I was invited to join a talk show. The host was an old friend who once freelanced for the former team. As the show opened, she asked gently, "If you could go back to that day, would you choose to stay silent or speak up?" I looked into the camera, paused, and answered, "I would still choose silence, but silence for action, not for endurance." Afterlight continued to grow, but it never turned into the new media empire people assumed it would. I kept it small. The team never exceeded 10 members. We worked by one principle I had written from the start. Real value does not come from budgets or reach. It comes from compassion strong enough to turn one person's story into shared belief. I still receive messages from strangers every week, some from people who had battled depression, saying our video helped them finally reach out to a professional. Others from people who had just lost their jobs, telling me my story made them feel less alone. I did not know how long I could keep going, but I knew one thing for sure. As long as someone was still willing to tell the truth, Afterlight would still have a reason to exist. I never saw Harper again after the conference. Katie said she had left her position and was now working freelance. No one knew exactly why. Maybe she was tired, or maybe she realized she had lost more than she had ever expected. I felt neither triumph nor regret. It was done. All that remained was the lesson. One day, by chance, I saw one of her social media posts. It no longer had the usual polished captions, just a photo of the sunrise, with a line that read, "Everyone needs a moment to be heard with honesty." I didn't like it. I didn't comment. I simply scrolled past. But inside, I smiled softly. Some changes do not need to be seen. I was once betrayed, once pushed off the very path I had helped build. I once sat alone in a dark room, unsure if tomorrow would still have space for someone like me. But I chose not to become a victim. I did not strike back with noise. I answered with success. And I know that was never just for me. It was for everyone who had ever been left behind and still chose to rise. Perhaps the real question is no longer, why did they do this to me? But rather, how far will I go from where they left me?